This is Lean Startup 101 for developers. I'm Abby Fichtner, hacker chick and evangelist for startups with Microsoft. So what's a lean startup? A lean startup is about creating companies with a big vision where we want to change the world and do something really significant. And Eric Ries, who created the concept of lean startup, says, considering the incredible amount of human energy, passion, and creativity that we invest in creating new products and services, it's a terrible waste that so many of them fail. And so his promise of the lean startup is that we can be more disciplined about this. And instead of building startups according to myth, we can guide them with facts and knowledge. We don't have to keep wasting our time building things that nobody wants. So when the Agile Manifesto came out about 10 years ago and it said things like, we value working software over comprehensive documentation, I didn't get it. I mean, duh. At that point, my entire career had been with startups, and I thought everybody developed software like startups did, with duct tape and glue and Band-Aids, because we're building things that nobody else has ever built before, and we're trying to figure out what's going to make sense for customers. And so we try one thing, and if that doesn't work, we throw it out and we try something else, and it's all about finding software that's going to work for our customers. So when the Agile Manifesto came out, I was at Lightning Cast, and after many, many tries, we'd managed to get a product that was not only working, but that we had a couple of customers for. We even got some VC money. And so the VP of engineering came up to us and said, guys, you gotta stop hacking, because we have customers now, and so we need a product that can perform and scale for our customers. And we went, oh, shit. And so we started looking at development practices and how can we develop more effectively. And I got really excited about Agile and Lean and how they have techniques to help us develop more effectively, to help us create this beautiful, clean code that's so easy to maintain and scale. But I had to ask myself, is this maybe overkill at a startup? Is clean code really the most important thing when we've got an idea but no money yet, and we just need to figure out if our idea is going to work so we can get customers and become a sustainable company? So another quote by Eric Ries that, of course, we all already know, which is that most technology startups fail not because the technology doesn't work, not because our code wasn't clean enough, but because we're making something that there's not a real market for. And so what we need is something in between. We need discipline, but we need discipline in a way that makes sense for startups. The goal of a lean startup is to identify where our vision of how we're going to change the world intersects with what reality can accommodate. And the thing is, it's probably not quite where we think it is. If we look at the single biggest predictor of failure for startups, sticking to the initial business plan. And so while we absolutely still value working software over documentation, I mean, duh, there's actually something that we value more in a startup, and that is learning over working software. If we can figure out what people want, we're all awesome coders, right? We can develop it, but first we need to figure out what it is that they want and what they're willing to pay for. And the thing to keep in mind is that startups are not just small versions of large organizations. Large organizations are already operating in a known market, solving a known problem, so they're able to focus on execution, on better ways to solve that problem and reaching more customers. But startups are starting from nothing. They haven't even validated that there's a need for this fabulous idea of theirs, and so they're focused on learning and discovery rather than execution. There's this build, measure, learn loop in Lean Startup, and I love how Kent Beck describes it. He says in startups, all we've got are ideas. Kent calls them almost impossibles. And so we take these almost impossibles and we think about how we might measure or validate whether people would be willing to pay for them. Sure, we might build some code in order to validate our ideas, but working software is not our goal. Our goal here is learning, because as entrepreneurs, our unit of progress is learning, not execution. And if we can make that mind shift, it's really huge, because as developers, we love solving things, right? It's part of our DNA. It's fun to build things. But when we're trying to create a successful startup, how fun is it to spend months building something that nobody wants? In fact, in Lean, we have a term for that, right? We call it muda, or waste. And so the question is, how do we minimize waste? How do we stop spending a bunch of time building things that nobody wants? So let's get back to our goal. Our goal is not execution. It's to identify where our big vision intersects with what reality can accommodate. And Lean Startup gives us a disciplined way to find this intersection. We want to focus on the fundamental feedback loop between when we have an idea and when we've learned whether or not our idea makes sense. So we don't want to spend a ton of time pontificating whether or not something is the right idea. Should it be blue? Should it be green? A lot of times it's faster to just put something out there and see what happens. Make it blue and measure the change in traffic. Or do split testing where half the customers see blue, half see green, and see which gets the better response. We might have an assumption like blue will be more effective, but that's just a guess, right? Build, Measure, Learn is about turning our guesses into facts so we can understand what the current reality is. So our goal here is not to do any one of these things well. Our goal is to get through the entire loop as fast as possible. And our strategy for doing this is something called minimum viable product. We want to figure out what the minimum thing is that we can build that's going to take us to the next step. To demonstrate this concept, there's this great blog post by Christian Y. Glendowski called The Minimum Viable Treehouse. And he's talking about how he's trying to make a treehouse for his kids, and it's taken a while. And so his oldest one says to him, "But Papa, you built our last treehouse in a day." And he says, "Yeah, but that was a couple of pallets and a ladder." This time Christian had a grander vision. He wanted to build something way better. This, by the way, is a picture of the world's largest treehouse, which cost $7 million to build. And as adults, we might think this rocks. How freaking cool to have a treehouse like this, right? But we have to think about our market and what problem it is they want us to solve for them. And so for kids, what they want is a place that's up and away from adults. If it's something that's hard to get to and grimy and only big enough for 4-foot-tall kids, that might be just the thing. Whereas something like this, adults might be comfortable in. Do our kids really want us coming up there to play in the treehouse with them? No way. And it's got all these windows to let the light stream in. How much of a bummer is that for trying to sit up in the tree and tell creepy ghost stories? I mean, really. And so our target market might be great with a couple of pallets and a ladder. This might be our minimum viable feature set because it's something to sit on up high, away from the adults. And best of all, it's available in a day so we can go play like now. So you should not be building something like this. You should be building something like this. It should be something so crude that it embarrasses you as a developer to put in front of your market. Okay, but seriously, that's a treehouse, not reality. So let's look at something that real startups do, and stop me if you've heard this before. We had this idea for a product, we went off and built it, put it up on our website, and not a single person clicked through to it. So we spent a significant amount of time building it. What did we learn? I guess we learned that we didn't have a viable product for our market. Was there a faster way for us to have learned this? We could have put the button up there for them to download it, and when they click it, oops! If we had some analytics that could show us the count of 0 that clicked through, that would have been just as effective. We could have learned just as much without having to actually build the feature. And so a totally viable lean startup tactic is to just create a landing page. See if there's any interest in something before taking the time to go build it. And something else really cool you can do with a landing page is finding people who are interested in your product. You can reach out to them, find the ones that have the problem you're trying to solve, and are willing to try out your early ideas. We call these people early evangelists. They're people who can share your vision and see the potential even in a couple of planks and a ladder, often because they have some pain point and they can see that you're trying to solve it. And these people are awesome because if you can get them excited early on, they can help you test your early ideas, they can become your first customers, they can even help you evangelize your product out to others. Another cool lean startup tactic, SneakerNet. You want to automate something, but you don't want to take the time to build it before you know if people care or not. So why not SneakerNet it? When the customer presses go, give them a message, "Thanks, we'll email you as soon as we have the results." And then a real live human runs off to actually do the work. Sure, it's not going to scale to 1,000 requests a day, but if you're a startup getting 1,000 requests a day, that's a great problem to have. So what we want to be doing as we go through our build, measure, learn loop is figuring out how we can fail as fast as possible. In other words, if something isn't going to work, if there's a part of our vision that has no connection whatsoever to reality, we want to figure that out right away. And we have to be persistent. We have to keep in mind that changing the world takes time, and so we need to keep going through ideas until we find what's going to work. How do we know if it's going to work? Well, if we've got customers that are willing to pay for it, that's a pretty good sign. Because in a startup, we start with our big vision of how we're going to change the world. I want to make flying cars. But to be successful, we don't have to build the flying cars. That in itself won't actually make us successful. To be successful, we have to find customers for our flying cars. And so we recognize that in a startup, customer development is just as, if not more important than product development. So in a lean startup, you actually have two teams, and this is your entire staff, every single person at the startup, be them CEO, CTO, whatever. The first is our problem team. This is the part of the company dedicated to figuring out what problem we're really trying to solve for customers. They're focused on talking to customers. Who are they? Do they have a problem? They're continually surfacing hypotheses and trying every day to prove those hypotheses wrong. What are we doing wrong? What would make us more effective? The second team is our solution team, and this is where our developers and engineers sit. These are the people building out our minimum viable product. They're not looking at how many features we can cram in. In fact, we don't want them putting out a lot of features at once, because if you put out, say, 5 features and then there's a change in traffic, how do you know which of those 5 led to that? And so their role instead is figuring out what the absolute minimum amount of work is that needs to be done to test out the problem solution. And so when we look at Steve Blank's customer development model on the left, you can see the first 2 circles, customer discovery and customer validation, are iterative. There's an arrow that goes between them. And this period is all about learning, identifying who's going to buy our product and learning about them. Because the truth is, we start off with our big vision of how we're going to change the world, and we have these guesses about who our customers might be and what the market might look like, but it's during customer discovery and validation that we get to use our build, measure, learn loop to turn those guesses into facts. And this is really where we're focused on learning over building. We're not trying to learn about every single customer. We're really focusing on those early evangelists, because these are the ones who can share our vision and get really excited by our early ideas of a couple of planks and a ladder. They get it, and they'll work with us in these really early stages with our minimum viable products. And it's really only once that we've nailed what's going to work for our early evangelists that we can start moving towards the right. And as we move from the left to the right, we can get more disciplined about how we develop our software. Because once we've nailed our early evangelist, we can start working on how we're going to get more customers, and then we can start scaling the company. And this is the point at which we need to stop hacking and actually develop good software that's going to perform and scale. And that's where we use agile development to effectively and iteratively build out our product. And I don't see it as a big jump where we jump from build, measure, learn one day to agile development the next. I see it as a continuum where in the beginning we're focused on learning who our customers are and what's going to work for them. And as we begin to understand our customers, we can focus more on delivering value to them. The thing is, until we've learned who our customers are, it doesn't make sense to focus on the effectiveness of our development, because we don't want to spend time building that product that nobody wants. But once we understand what our customers want and how to get more of them, then we can focus on scaling up the company and start looking at how to develop our product more effectively. And the cool thing about this method is that sometimes, just like that treehouse, we discover that the minimum version of our product is actually even better than the maximum one. I mean, hell, just look at Twitter. So get out there, create your lean startup, and change the world. If you want more information, Eric Ries is the creator of Lean Startup. Check out his blog, Startup Lessons Learned. Steve Blank, the creator of Customer Development. Check out his blog, steveblank.com, and his book, 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And I am Abby Fichtner, Hacker Chick and evangelist for startups at Microsoft. If you like this, come visit me at the Hacker Chick blog and tell me about how you're going to change the world.